This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.
Hey, this is Erin with Cornell Studio Supply located in Dayton, Ohio, exclusive distributor of Jen Allen templates and Put a Lid on It t-shirts. We are a proud sponsor of this episode and the Brickyard Network. Find all your pottery and ceramic sculpture needs, including the largest stock of GR pottery forms at cornellstudiosupply.com. At Cornell Studio Supply, we are owned and operated for potters, by potters.
A special thank you to the Archie Bray Foundation for sponsoring this episode of Tales of the Red Clay Rambler. The Bray Clay business is your best source for Bray epoxy, a two-part moldable epoxy intended for post-firing repairs. Working like clay, it's easy to shape, texture, fill gaps, and recreate missing parts. Bray epoxy is sold in tan, white, and black base colors, and we also have a 9-color kit that will allow you to perfectly disguise your repair. To place your order, call us at 406-442-2521 or order online anytime at archiebrayclay.com.
Welcome to the Tales of a Red Clay Rambler podcast, featuring interviews with culture makers from around the world. This is Ben Carter. I'm going to be your host. If you'd like more information on the show, please visit our website, talesofaredclayrambler.com. Welcome back to episode 527 of the podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Today we have the final installment of our series about student loans with an episode featuring Liz Noonan and Christian Bailey. They share their individual experience dealing with fluctuating payments, managing debt as a family, and the ups and downs of loan forgiveness. Liz is a studio artist in Boxborough, Massachusetts, and Christian is an artist and educator based in Gulfport, Mississippi. If you'd like to find out more, you can go to liznoonansceramics.com or christianbaileyceramics.com. I wanted to take a minute and highlight a few excellent resources for helping those affected by Hurricane Helene. Julie Wiggins is a ceramic artist who has been spearheading relief efforts for folks in the Penland, North Carolina area. You can support her by donating to a GoFundMe, which is going to be linked in the show notes of this episode. She's been taking in resources and then distributing them out to the area with the help of a crew she's put together. So good on Julie for getting all that done. It's also been great to see many organizations and individual donors mobilize their support for the Craft Emergency Relief Fund. I have pieces available for purchase in 2 fundraisers that will support surf at Clay Akar and the Companion Gallery. To support surf, all you do is go to their websites, buy the work, and those profits go to Surf Plus. You can also donate to them directly at their website. That's surfplus.org. Without further ado, we'll get to the interview. I just want to have y'all introduce yourselves and say where you live now. And then also, if you're a teacher, you could say where you teach. So we'll start with you, Liz.
So I'm Liz Noonan, and I'm in Boxborough, Massachusetts. I'm not a teacher. I'm a studio artist.
And you said Boxborough or Foxborough?
Not Foxborough. I was going to specify that because everybody thinks we're Foxborough, but we're not. It's Boxborough with a B. And this town is so small. It's right in between Worcester and Boston. But we don't even have a post office here. It's tiny. It's a tiny town.
I'm Christian Bailey, and I live in Socher, Mississippi. I teach at Harrison Central High School, which is in Gulfport, Mississippi, which is right next to Biloxi, which most people know for its casinos.
Today, we're going to talk about student loans. So I appreciate you all being willing to talk about this publicly, because one of the issues that is brought up when we talk about money is that people often don't share about things like the cost of education or the cost of a student loan, interest rates, things like that. So I appreciate y'all being willing to be out front about it, because I think it can really help younger students to figure out their own path. So could either of you talk about when you first got a student loan?
The first one that I got was apparently in 1997. It was my third year at college. And I only know that because when I went to apply to have some of my loans dispersed, because I was a teacher, they told me I couldn't because I had a loan that predated October of 1997. So, and it was at that time, those loans, I was right out of high school. So most of my college was paid for by scholarships and parental assistance. And so it was just a small loan. I left college right after that for a few years to go work in the scuba diving industry and then in the sculpting industry. So when I went back is when I really got and I had to pay for college myself. That's when my loans really kind of became the way to pay for college.
Were you going to a state school or a private school?
I was going to a state school. I was going to University of Southern Mississippi, which is actually where I went back to and ended up getting both my Bachelor of Fine Arts and my Master's of Education.
And do you remember those early loans, what the interest rates were?
I believe my first loan rate was 8%. That one from 97 was 8%. And that was a Stafford loan too. You know, the subsidized Stafford loan. Then when I went back, the rates were right about 6%. And then I refinanced after I got out of college. And I think I refinanced them all down to around 3.5%. And my graduate loans were like at 5.5%.
For young people listening to this, the interest rates, they probably are thinking, oh, this is boring. Like what does the number have to do with anything? But what the interest rate does is it allows those loans to grow exponentially, or at least at that rate, while you're trying to pay them off. And what it ends up doing is it often pushes the timeline for you to pay them off way farther into the future.
And the one thing that I didn't truly understand is when I took my loans out, as an undergrad, that first, the interest, as soon as you take it out, the interest starts to accrue on the unsubsidized loans. And so when you have an unsubsidized loan, you start accruing interest that as soon as you sign that dotted line and they pay it to the school. And I know some of my current students now and former students, they didn't have that understanding either, because nobody talks about it. Nobody says, once you take this money, you begin accruing interest as soon as you sign the dotted line.
So my first loan was in 1998. Again, Stafford loan, similar to what you were saying. And my story is a little bit different. So what I want to say first of all is thank you for talking about this, because this is a really important issue. I was not someone who had the opportunity to go to college outside of high school. My father died when I was a teenager. Me and my sisters put ourselves through school, and we would not have been able to do it without the opportunity to take out loans. That was my reality. There's no way I would have been able to go to college without that. And I went to school full time at the age of 26. I graduated at 29. I did a little bit of night school before that. But I also went to a state school. I went to the Massachusetts College of Art. Really great school, great opportunity for me. But I also worked full time. I had an apartment, I had a car payment, I was married. So I had a different experience, and I know it's not unique, and I'm not the only one with it, but I did know what I was getting into. I did. I knew that as I took out, I have numbers if you want them.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, because I felt like I'm comfortable talking about this in part because I didn't have any money. So it didn't matter to me because I was like, well, I'm not going to get an education without it. So I just did a little math quickly. So I did qualify for loan forgiveness. But when I took out my loans, started in 1998, again, I did it all through college. I want to say it was about $42,000, I think, in student loans. That was just to pay for my education, the cost of my education. It didn't pay for my health insurance. It didn't pay for my car payment, my groceries, nothing. All of that was on me. And I, over the years, have made all of my payments with the exception of times when I was pregnant, I have children, and was no longer able to work. I have taught also in studios, and I've been studio assistants, things like that. And there's a point in pregnancy where I just couldn't even get into the kiln. Those 1027s are pretty tall when you've got when you've got a basketball belly in front of you. And also a lot of those jobs don't give you maternity leave. So those things. Anyway, so I took out about $40,000 in loans. I was forgiven recently, I think $20,000 in loans was forgiven entirely. I've paid at a minimum, I don't know for sure, at a minimum $53,000 by paying $230 a month for at least 240 months. So that gives you some idea. When you talk about the interest rate, right? How you refinance, there's all these options. And one thing that I think students don't know is that your loans also get sold to other banks. And each time that is a new fluctuation, your interest rate, how it's paid. There also might be fees from your bank involved in that. So that's reality. I was forgiven $20,000 in student loans. I'm grateful for that. We're still paying my husband's loans. And I just dropped a kid off at college last week. So in my mind, this is a full circle moment because we will definitely be taking out loans for our children. And they will also be paying part of their education as well. So that's my experience. Is a little different maybe from what's typical, high school age, all of that. But I knew what I was getting into, but I wouldn't do it differently.
One thing you said, though, that I want to highlight is that you originally borrowed 42. You've paid 53. You've paid more than the original amount, and you had 20 forgiven. So what we're showing here is interest, that over time, interest accrues, and those things get bigger and bigger and bigger. And Christian, you had shared a little bit about that with me on Instagram. Do you mind talking about sort of the bubbling effect of that compound interest in your loan and how that affected the payments?
When I left college, I had taken out right at about $33,000 in loans. The last time that I had checked, after paying for 10 years, I still owed $60,000. It had ballooned that much. And as Liz was saying, I had one company, I was paying $450 a month. Then they sold to another company and they were like, oh, well, you only have to pay $250 a month because you were paying so much. So I was like, okay, I'll listen to what they said. Then they got sold to another company and my payments went to $350 and then back up to $450 a month. Without any, notifications. It was just like, you get a bill in the mail going, oh, your payment is now X amount of dollars. And it was very frustrating, especially, I was a teacher. I didn't make a whole lot of money. I still don't make a whole lot of money as a teacher. I have to redo the budget every month, depending on which bank bought it. I ended up, after I finally did I fill out the paperwork, they ended up giving me a refund of right about $12,500 of an overpayment on my loans. So that was a nice, bonus to come in because I could then, pay off a car and get a little bit further ahead out of debt. But yeah, it's those loans were it was fun to play the loan game and figure out who had my loans this month.
Well, it's a great topic because I had similar loans. I had all subsidized loans, federal subsidized loans from the federal government. Even those got transferred 4 times in the life of my loan. And it went from, they all have these kind of grand names. Like one was Fed Loan Servicing. It sounds so like great. And then you had that one? Yeah. And another one was Mahila. Like they transfer them to try to theoretically take down the cost of managing your loan. But what it means for us as the people borrowing is it's really hard to establish a paper trail. So that was one thing with you, Liz. You said, I've paid at least $53,000, but were you similar to me in that it's very hard to figure out actually what you've paid because no one person's keeping track of that?
Yes, absolutely. So I do remember, so I remember the interest rate I started with also was 8%. I also remember looking at, because this is a long time ago, I graduated in 2002, right? So I remember looking at that and saying, wow, I'm borrowing like $42,000 and I'm going to end up paying like $80,000. Is this right? And then I thought, okay, well, I'm going to pay off as much as I can. I'm just going to try to, pay extra because that was really shocking to me. And then, of course, life and, other things I'm sure we could talk about extensively. I was not able to do that because there were times where $230 a month was difficult. It was difficult. If a class didn't fill, I wasn't able to work because I had a baby. I had to put those loans on hold, and that interest just kept accruing. So yeah, it felt like a giant weight, honestly, genuinely. So I was so grateful when the loan forgiveness came out. I did not expect it. I didn't, but I'm grateful that I got a little bit of that for sure.
And we're going to talk about forgiveness, the different programs that y'all were a part of in just a little bit. But I did want to talk about how the actual loan payments affected your financial life. So like Christian, with yours, like having one that fluctuated, you said you had to redo your budget every couple months or whenever they changed the amount. How did having those payments affect things like being able to buy a car, being able to pay rent, buy a house, things like that?
It definitely inhibited the opportunities. It made me have to stay at one particular school longer than I wanted to because of administrative issues, because it was a paycheck and I knew I had that money coming in. So I had to stay. I couldn't explore other options. I was tied down. Of course, at that time also I'd picked up a mortgage and I had a car payment and insurance. But it definitely, having that debt hang over and wanting to repay it limited, I couldn't do some of the residencies that I wanted to apply for because I was, I had to make sure that I had a steady income so I could make that payment. It did affect, and of course, making the payments does help the credit, but the couple of times when I had to miss a payment, it hurt the credit. So that meant the interest rate on a car loan would have been higher. And it was, tough times, but you buckle down, you make it through. You hopefully you get some good support from your spouse or your partner, and you do the same for them.
Can you talk a little bit more about the credit aspect?
As I was making my payments and making regular payments, it did add to it. It showed that I had a steady payment policy. So then my credit score would slowly keep going up. Whereas if I was missing, or the one time that I had to take a deferment, I noticed that my credit score didn't go up and actually did go down a couple of numbers because I wasn't making that steady payment. And then, naturally that affects credit on everything else. Instead of getting a 5% interest rate on a car, you now have to pay a 6.5% interest rate on a car. And it just snowballs. You have that debt and it just snowballs everything else.
Yeah, those are really good points. I think when you are talking about the things that are supposed to show right on on your credit. Gally, your student loans aren't technically supposed to show on your credit. However, when you go in and you look at how much you're borrowing, that I believe it is reflected in that, because it'll show like what percentage of your, income or whatever is like the leverage of how much you have already borrowed. That is lumped into that. So while technically it's not supposed to, it does, because it shows that you have like, $80,000 combined debt, instead of like, let's say you take, buy a used car for 10 grand. Well, but you also have, like me, let's just use me for example, $40,000 in debt. So now you don't owe 10, you actually owe 50. So again, the interest rate, really important to talk about how that fluctuates with regards, to think that people with more money would actually not be able to access a lower interest rate than someone who doesn't make as much money and would really, really benefit from a lower interest rate. Those things are not offered to people in certain income brackets. And that's a huge fundamental flaw. People who are graduating from college, reality, they need a car. They have to pay rent. They have student loans. They don't have access to a healthy interest rate that benefits them. They don't, because that's part of it. Your debt is part of it. Your student debt is part of that package.
Yeah, your debt to income ratio is what's affected by the total amount of debt that you have. Even if the individual student loan is not supposed to be held against you when you get a mortgage, it's still a part of the formula.
It is.
Which is something we all have to deal with. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that we're all generally of a certain age, and that since we've all finished school got way more expensive. And there's a sort of inverse relationship between public taxation in terms of the way that public schools are paid for, which is usually tied to property taxes. As those taxes go down and a lot of governments reduce taxation on people with more means, our school system has gotten more and more expensive, like generationally more and more. And now, like, I think I paid in 1998, I think my school tuition was $11,000. And at that same school, which is a state school in North Carolina, that same school is in the 20s. So that's gone up tremendously. I'm sure at your guys' school, if you tried to enroll right now, it would have gotten even more expensive than when you went there.
Oh yeah. You can't afford to go. I mean, state school in Massachusetts is like in the 40s, and we just dropped one of our kids off at college, and she got scholarships and, based on like her grades and all that. And she's at University of Vermont. It's like $60,000. That's a lot. But she got like, it should be horrified to hear me brag. She got a really good scholarship that will prevent her from having a massive amount of loans. But one of our other children actually chose to go to trade school for this reason. And that was a really smart decision for her, because now she has like a good job with benefits and not, $200,000. You're talking like $200,000 for a 4-year degree. That's difficult. That's really difficult.
How do you talk to your students about student loans, Christian? Because they're going to be jumping into this soon.
They are jumping into this soon. They for the last 19 years, they've been jumping into it. I tell them, look, here's the big thing: work on your ACT scores. The ACT is going to get you the money, right? If you can get your ACT up to a 28 in Mississippi, that will get most of your tuition and room and board covered at most of your state schools. Not all of them are going to get the 28. So then it's, okay, well, let's look at other schools that you might be able to work with. And what other avenues can we do? Do we do 2 years at a junior college, which is cheaper, but even those have gone up. I mean, when I went to junior college, it was $500 a semester. I think now it's around $2,500 a semester just for a junior college. So do we do 2 years out of junior college and transfer to a state school? So you're taking on less debt. I try to convince many of my students to take AP courses and dual credit courses while they're in high school because they're free for the most part. And then you come out with, at least in some cases, I've had students come out with, 2 semesters of college credits already done. So when they go in, they, instead of 4 years, they only have to figure out how to pay for 3 years of college. How do we get work study programs for them? How, what other sources of income, how many different, how many times are we going to apply for, the left-handed scholarship or, what's out there? You have to search for everything. And some of my students that want to become artists, I talk to them and say, well, do you want to be, if you want to be a working artist, you may want to, eschew going to school and just develop your skills by going to workshops and develop your brand, especially a lot of my kids that are into digital art. Sometimes it might not be the best opportunity for you. And, it works for some of them, but a lot of them, they go and they still have to take on that debt. And some of them, of course, are not going to listen regardless. So they have to learn the hard way.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art. The collection exists as an online resource for research and inspiration, featuring photos of over 4,000 objects made by over 1,000 artists. The images are high quality and can be used with no permission required, making them a great resource for students and teachers. To find out more, visit rosenfieldcollection.com.
Hey folks, Sunshine Cobb here, ceramic artist and current resident coordinator at the Bray. I'm excited to announce that our application portal is now open for our 2025 residency cohort. Applications are due by December 19th, 2024. For details on all our residencies available, head to archiebray.org/residencies. Please help us spread the word about this amazing new opportunity at the Bray. Thanks so much.
When you started having these conversations with your kids, Liz, what was the tone of the conversation? Like, how did you set up this idea that loans are going to have to be a part of their life?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I just want to lead with real quickly that in Massachusetts, one of our community colleges, Middlesex Community College, is now free. It's now free for Mass residents.
That's great.
And originally had it for people age, I think, 26 and up, and they've done away with that this year because most people don't go back at 26. I did, but most people don't. So the conversations about college, I would say my husband and I are really honest about money with our kids. We don't hide things from them. We let them know how much things cost. Both my husband and I worked in the food industry when we were, teenagers. So my kids have had jobs where, being wait staff. So they understand, also genuinely, you can make great money working in the food industry. And when you're talking about paying for college, like my daughter worked this summer to save up so that she would have money for her school year, waiting tables. So we're honest with them. Basically when we talked about it with our daughter with trade school, we ended up paying for most of that because we also have to weigh out, fairness on what we can do. So we have 4 children. Okay, I'm just gonna
Sure, lay it out for us.
We have 4. We are gonna be so broke, but anyway, my oldest is 20, my youngest is 7. So a 20-year-old did 1 semester of college, really was not for her, and then decided to go to trade school. We supported that. The tab on that, I don't want to give those numbers because it's her business, but we helped her pay that, and also her grandparents helped pay for some of that. Her second daughter, who we just dropped off, when she applied to colleges, one of the biggest things we talked about was great, you're an honor roll student. You've got all these things that would make you a great candidate for some of these private schools. One, would you be happy going to school with people with a lot of privilege? And I'm not saying we don't have any privilege. We certainly do, but we don't have copious amounts of money. We went on our first family vacation last year. So there's that, right? Who do you want to be with in school? And then two, who's going to offer you the best scholarship? Who's going to give you the most money, and what's the best fit? So we did a bunch of trips with her. She's very strong academically, and University of Vermont just happens to be the one that when we went there, she felt the most at home and gave her the biggest scholarship package. It's a big university. There's a lot of opportunities for her in terms of employment. So when she gets out, she's also studying biology. She'll have good, job opportunities to her. We've talked, some of my kids are very creative and they're definitely artistically bent, but to be honest, they know that I have not made a great living as an artist, and I have always had to have another job. That's part of it. I've always been honest with my kids about that, and my students when I've taught, or any place I've worked as a studio assistant or whatever. Because for me, again, I was 19, my dad died, and I had a single mom. There's nobody, I didn't even get bus fare. Okay. Everything I paid for by myself, which meant I had to get a job with health benefits. I had to pay rent. I had to have a car, So for me, when you say, Ben, when you started talking about money, it is a conversation that's uncomfortable for so many people. However, for a lot, I think, of the US, I can't speak for everyone, but for a lot of the US, we should be having more frank conversations about money. We should, because I don't regret getting a degree. My parents didn't go to college. It was like a real point of pride for me, but I always had to have a hustle. I like hustle, but it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone. It's for me, but maybe it's not for everyone,
Well, let's talk about the hustle, because I think this is something that often binds us together as a community. I know a lot of friends that have multiple jobs even now, like they're leaders in the field, in air quotes, like famous people in the field, but they're doing a little teaching. They're teaching workshops on the weekends. They're selling their work. They're doing a lot of different things to kind of make it work. Can you guys talk just a little bit about the jobs you've had over the years, and if you've ever had to have multiple jobs to be able to kind of put the financial package together to pay the loan, to pay the house, to pay the car?
I put myself through college working as a makeup artist for MAC Cosmetics for, I want to say, 6 years. I worked every single weekend. I worked weddings. I loved it though. Okay. I freaking loved showing up with my makeup kit. I did some stuff with some people who were photographers for album covers, things like that. So I think, as an artist, maybe you have a bigger skill set than you even know that you have. At the time, working as a makeup artist, I made great money. And I would teach at night. And I continued with that, teaching at night, also teaching workshops here and there, until I quit I quit makeup. But I've done things like I've written copy. I've done everything. I sold wholesale, markets. Pretty much any opportunity that I could get, I would say yes to, as long as I could fit it in. It became difficult when I became a parent. It became more difficult over the pandemic, and then re-entering into the pandemic when I had children who weren't old enough to be vaccinated. That was tricky. And at that point, I haven't been teaching now for 2 years. So I've just done some markets and some online sales. And that I don't make much money doing that, genuinely. I'm just going to be honest. I don't.
in college, I had to work multiple jobs. Also, I worked landscaping, I worked construction. I would take, jobs as needed. When I got out of college and I got, teaching, I was teaching high school. I was teaching scuba diving. I got into real estate, trying to be a real estate agent at the same time. We're still trying to make art and sell the art. And even today, I'm teaching full-time high school. I work. I'm teaching. I've got a set of workshops lined up that are coming up. And then, of course, applying for every grant possible to help pay for it all. You have to have the multiple streams of income. There's just no way to get around anymore without doing it. Even my wife has taken on a second job. She's picking up pet sitting services and doing certification for another company on top of herself working for a college. Just so you can not only stay where we're at, but try to slowly chip away and make a little bit of headway for the future.
I'm glad you brought up relationships, and you've both mentioned relationships. And having a supportive partner is something that I think is essential to being an artist, because often, even if we make money, we don't make it on a regular paycheck. It's kind of a boom and bust cycle that we're in. But I got quotes from people, and I just wanted to share one with you. They said that they were glad that their partner didn't think their student loans were a red flag when they met them. And I had never thought of that, because for us, we're kind of used to taking big loans. Like, a lot of artists have big loans. But this person's husband had come out of the military and he had gone to school on the GI Bill. So everything was covered, or whatever they call the GI Bill now. And she just made this point of, like, there's a little bit of shame involved with money. And depending on how your partner thinks about that money, they might think you are a red flag financially. So can y'all talk kind of about that, balancing that in your relationship as you talked about money and grew as a couple?
Yeah. So when me and my wife got together, she had her own house. I had my own house. So we had those combined mortgage payments. It wasn't anything that I shied away from discussing with her. It was like, here's what it costs, for me. And it was, one of those things. So we each picked up kind of a part of the overall bill. So I will take care of, the house payment. I pay the car payment. I pay the insurance. She handles the groceries. She handles, the water bill. She's the one who is, if we do go out, it's she's the one paying. So I get to sit there and look pretty. But if we didn't have those conversations, it was, it would have just made things much more difficult because, you think about it and then, there is a shame involved in having a load of debt, so you don't want to talk about it. And, being able to talk about it with somebody who then also continued to support, my dreams of wanting to continue working as an artist. She was the one who told me I had to pick. I could either continue working in art or I could do real estate and teach. I couldn't do all three things. And so I listened to her. It was the wise decision. And I went with the less stressful job, I guess, or maybe the more stressful job. You're on that artist versus real estate agent one. But, it was her support that allowed me to do that and to continue pursuing all of the things that come along with having accrued that debt to get my education. It has allowed me to, go to places I wouldn't have been able to go to before. And I definitely wouldn't have been able to do it without her support emotionally and sometimes financially.
That's so nice to hear someone else's story about how that works for them financially. So when I met my husband, Adam, he actually took time off from work to get a master's degree, and I supported him through this. So I was the working person, and I was also putting myself through school, which sounds totally crazy. But I think about it now, I'm like, I don't even know how I did it. But so he went to MIT, and I actually worked at MIT also, another gig great job. I loved working at MIT as an admin. Man, some of the coolest people, the students, the staff, everything, loved it. And so that's how we had our benefits. My husband went to the Sloan School there. And when he graduated during the dot-com crash. And a lot of people won't know what this is, but this was basically like a really crushing moment for a lot of people graduating. And financially, it was absolutely devastating for both of us. And it took us, I'm going to be really honest with you, it has been up and down over the years. My husband works in the biotech industry. And I don't want to give away too much of my husband's story because that would not be fair. He should tell that himself. But I will say that we have both had to work a lot and juggle children with no support for over 20 years. It had only been, and I mean things like I didn't go out for coffee for years, like not even coffee. Like Starbucks wasn't in my budget for a solid 15 years. And there were times where we're like, we can't, like I've had to put off paying credit cards. I mean, it was rough. I've walked out of grocery stores because my bank card was denied with my kids with me. So that's, I'm just going to be very honest with you. It's been really hard, but I grew up in a similar way. So I was comfortable without having, I don't want to say without having anything, because obviously that would not be true. You know what I mean? Like you have your family and all of that. But when you grow up in poverty, you don't expect it to be different. So for me, the hustle was the life that I had grown up in. So that wasn't different. So that being said, over the past couple of years, my husband's job has taken off. He's doing great. We're finally financially stable, and we're in a really good place financially. And it's also honestly probably part of the reason why I'm comfortable talking about finances is because I don't feel strangled by them anymore. Okay, so like my husband, yeah, you say, artist, support you, whatever. But like I married an entrepreneur. So it was never like a given that we were going to be financially stable. Now we are, which is great, but we do not take it for granted. We don't.
It's kind of refreshing actually to hear this, that in biotech, I'm sorry that it took that long for y'all to find that stability.
Oh,
because I feel like in the creative arts, we're always labeled as risk takers. And if the risk doesn't work out, there's this idea of like, oh, of course it didn't work out. You're an artist.
right.
But the thing is
okay.
like, we're just small business owners. And in the same way, the startup or whatever the business he worked for, it finally hit and things got better. That's how it is for us too.
It's so true. So my husband was actually like a history and economics person. Okay. With like talk about creative. I don't think that people in business are given enough credit for the creativity. I mean, my husband's a super creative, really interesting guy. And when you talk about support, right? I know I would have figured out the financial part of graduating from college. I could not have done it without his emotional support. There's no way. I didn't have the emotional support that's required to get through college. Yes, he got lucky. We both ended up working in like a similar industry. I got an admin job. He kind of worked his way up. And then the thing that he did that he's really good at, that he was underpaid for and undervalued for forever, was the thing that everybody needed during COVID. So he's done really well. So we got lucky. But
good to hear.
We've had really, really tough times, for sure.
And it sounds like that y'all prepared for years and years and years for things to maybe go poorly. And then when they went well, then it's like, okay, I'm glad we were prepared.
We've definitely had times where we thought things were going well, and then like he didn't get his contract renewed and didn't work for a year. It's been up and down. I'm still not relying on it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still like, okay, we got to get this. We can't assume that this will always be going well. We have to be prepared for it not to go well, but we also have to get our kids out of school. And and so that's a whole other thing as well.
I wanted to wrap the interview up talking about student loan forgiveness and the various ways that has affected you. And Christian, one thing you had said to me earlier is that you had originally applied for the public student loan forgiveness for essentially like a teaching-based forgiveness program, but that it was originally denied. So can you talk about the process of getting into the program?
Yeah, so the first time I applied for it was the original public service loan forgiveness program. And at that time, my loan servicer was Navient, and so I applied, and you had to apply through your loan servicer, and I did, and they told me that my particular loans were the incorrect repayment program, and then they told me that my employer was also not a qualified employer, so that just kind of took the wind out of my sails. That was in 2000. I think that was in 2010, the first time I applied. Then I was watching the news and I saw that, well, we now have what they call the temporary public service loan forgiveness program, where they had loosened some of the restrictions on the repayment program. So I gave it a shot again. I was like, okay, let me give this a shot, see what can come of it. And found out that my employer actually the whole time, my previous employer was actually a qualified employer. And then of course I currently work for the public school districts now. So that one qualified, and all I had to do is as soon as I got told, yes, your previous employer qualifies, I jumped in my car. I went over, I met with the president of that school and had him sign the paperwork that day so I could get it in and get the ball rolling. It was up and down for the first few weeks while I believe it was FedLoan that was handling. They took it over after Navient because everything got transferred over there. They actually had to go through and they had to get the paperwork from Navient, Mohilla. They had to get the paperwork from the state agency in Mississippi that originally had my loans. So it was a few weeks of watching and seeing, is it going to be qualified? Is it not going to qualify? And then I found that most of my loans did qualify, and they had forgiven them. And there were still 2 loans from my graduate program that were kind of hanging out there. And I was like, well, I can handle that. And then that paperwork came back and they forgave those. And I was like, so I got the notification that the loans had been forgiven. And I was like, cool, I can breathe now. And then they were like, well, you also overpaid, because I started paying on my student loans in 2006 and never and went all the way through all the way up to 2020 is when I think it went through. So 14 years of solid payments. And in that time I'd overpaid, like I say, I'd overpaid 12 grand over there 10 years. And so they actually refunded that, which was nice to get some money back from the government that I paid in. They didn't give me the interest though. That would have been better, but it was a roller coaster, watching and being denied the first time. I really thought I was just going to get denied again. I was just going to have to keep on struggling and making these payments for the next, I think I had another 15 years of payments supposedly left to make, just so I could continue teaching art.
So when you got into the public service loan forgiveness program and everything was settled, did you ever have the feeling like, oh, are they going to call me back and tell me this is not true and I have to pay this money back?
I still have that nightmare, actually. Sometimes
me too.
I think I have to. I didn't really qualify, and it was all just a cruel joke, and I have to continue paying things back. It still kind of hangs over that. I'm like waiting for the shoe to drop. I'm like, are they gonna want to come back for that refund they sent me? Or are they going to try and tax me on it? It's just, it's still one of those things that just kind of hangs over because everything keeps changing. But as soon as I did, as soon as I got through, I went around every single coworker I have here and went, "Have you got student loans? Apply for this. Do the paperwork. Get out of them if you can." And some actually have. A lot of them have. One of my close friends, they only have 2 more years of payments left, and they're done with their doctoral loans. So, because of the public service loan forgiveness program.
So, Liz, can you talk about the type of loan forgiveness that you had?
So I applied when I heard about the Biden's loan forgiveness program. I did not expect to get it. Absolutely not. I was really surprised. I want to say like at least 6 months went by and I didn't hear anything. And then when I got the email, I forwarded this to my husband. I was like, "Is this real? Like, is this real? Like, I really don't have to pay this anymore?" And he was like, "Yeah, it's legit." So I wrote down what it was called because I wanted to. Now I'm like losing my spot here. Okay. So my loans were forgiven under the IDR, or income driven repayment, for 240 or 300 months of payments. So that's what my email said. That's why my loan was forgiven, and I looked into it a little bit, and that's legit. But I do, when I see things like Republicans suing for loan repayment, blah blah blah, I do get nervous about that. I have not had nightmares about that, but I do get a little worried for sure that they're going to change their mind. I don't know. Can they do that? Can they change their mind? I don't think they can they? I don't know. I hope not.
Yeah, they cannot. I believe if they have actually been forgiven, that they cannot change their mind and go back. It's for the new people. But I think what this points out, though, and the reason that I originally had asked Christian about this, is that there is uncertainty in this whole process built in from the beginning. Like, you never quite know how much money do you owe, who you're going to pay. Like, it's needlessly confusing. When you go to buy a car, when you go to buy a house, I guess houses are different because your mortgage can often be sold to another bank. But generally, when you borrow money, I'm borrowing it from this person, and up front, like, this is how much I'm borrowing, this is how much it's going to cost. Student loans have been totally different. And, they've designed the student loan forgiveness programs to be similar, where there's also a lot of uncertainty. I think for non-Americans that are listening right now, they're probably just scratching their heads like, why would you design a system this complicated?
For sure. I'm thinking about when, like, your credit card statement, for example. And I remember when I first signed up for my, loans and stuff, I remember it was pretty clear. Like, it was like, this is what you owe. And if you pay this much, it'll be this much in, 40 years or whatever. And I remember being blown away by the number, but it was clear. And then as the loans get bought and sold over time, like, and here's another thing that I don't know if you guys worry about, you probably do, is that when you get emails from, Green Loan Education, you're kind of like, is that real? Or is that someone trying to scam me into giving my bank information? So I don't even click on those. I don't touch them because it happens so often. It happens so often that your loan gets bought and sold. And my husband still is like still in that loop, I want to say, oh gosh, I don't think it's an exaggeration. Like, every year he's like, someone else has my loan and I have to call them. But as AI becomes more intelligent and evolved and scams become much more, sophisticated, it gets harder to figure out what's real and what's not. So that's something that people also have to worry about, that, I didn't when I graduated. I have to worry about that.
To wrap up, I know we didn't talk about y'all's art much, and you're both accomplished artists, but I did want to give you guys the chance to plug your social media or website so that people could get in touch or buy your work if they are interested.
Oh, thank you. You can find me at Liz Noonan Ceramics on Instagram or LizNoonanCeramics.com.
You can find me at ChristianBaileyCeramics.com or Christian B Ceramics on Instagram.
Well, thank you so much to both of you for the time. I really appreciate it, and your honesty about this topic.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate you bringing it up. It's an important subject. I appreciate your candor too, Christian, and it was great meeting you online.
It was great meeting you. And again, yeah, you're right. It is something that really needs to be talked about, especially with this current generation coming up. They need information, and that they just don't seem to be getting it.
They don't, and everybody's situation is different. And so transparency really is important. All right, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Liz, Christian, and the other folks that took part in this series, as well as all of the folks on Instagram that sent in their experience with student loans. I really appreciate y'all sharing your information and also your experience. Before we go, I'd like to thank today's sponsors. That's the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art, Cornell Studio Supply, and the Archie Bray Foundation. If you or your organization is interested in becoming a sponsor on the show, you can get in touch at brickyardnetwork.org. I'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you all for tuning in. If you'd like more information on the artists on the show, or if you'd like more information about the workshops and events that I'll be having in the next couple months, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Carter Pottery. Another great way to support the show is to leave me a comment on iTunes. To do that, search Tales of a Red Clay Rambler under iTunes Podcasts, and you'll find a page that's linked to our show. Thank you guys for the support.